The road was empty that morning. A long highway stretched between two small towns, and only one black car moved slowly on it. The sun was rising, but the sky was still dark enough to make everything look quiet and strange. It was the kind of silence that made people feel something was about to happen. Officer Blake sat alone in his police car, parked behind a row of tall trees. He watched the black car through his dusty windshield. His eyes were sharp, almost angry, as if he was waiting for a mistake. Blake had a habit of judging people before knowing them, and today was no different. In his mind, the black car did not belong to a regular person. He gave a small smirk and whispered to himself, "These people never follow rules." The black car passed by him slowly. Blake's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Without thinking twice, he started his engine and pulled onto the road. His car lights flashed, and a loud siren echoed across the empty highway. The black car immediately slowed down and pulled to the side. Inside the black car sat a calm black man in a neat dark suit. He did not look scared. He did not look guilty. He simply looked quiet. When Blake walked toward the car, the man lowered his window gently. His movements were slow and careful, like someone who had faced this many times before. Blake did not wait. His voice came out harsh and rude. "Where are you going?" The man answered softly, "I'm on my way to a meeting." Blake narrowed his eyes. "Is this your car?" "Yes," the man replied calmly. "Show me your ID. Quickly." The man reached for his wallet, but Blake suddenly placed his hand on his gun. "Slowly," he shouted, making the situation feel 10 times more dangerous. The man froze for a moment, then continued slowly, keeping his eyes down. The man handed Blake his ID. Blake didn't even look at it properly. He just wanted to find a reason to control him. "What's inside the briefcase?" Blake pointed at the black briefcase on the passenger seat. "Work documents," the man answered. Blake didn't believe him. He never believed anything easily. "Step out of the car," he ordered. The man stepped out, still calm. He stood straight, his hands by his side. His face showed no fear, only patience. But Blake saw this as arrogance. "You think you're smart?" Blake snapped. "I only want you to follow proper protocol," the man replied politely. The word protocol made Blake angry. He hated when someone questioned his authority. "Turn around," Blake shouted. Before the man could speak, Blake grabbed his wrist and pushed him against the car. He handcuffed him roughly, even though the man did not resist at all. The man spoke quietly, "Officer, you really don't want to do this." But Blake ignored him and radioed for backup. The highway was silent again, except for the sound of the wind blowing against the car doors. The man sat on the ground now, handcuffed, his briefcase still lying inside the car. His calmness made the moment even more tense. It was as if he knew something Blake did not. Blake walked back and forth, waiting for his backup. His mind was full of anger and pride. He kept telling himself he did the right thing, even though there was no reason for the arrest. He stared at the man and said, "You think you can tell me what to do?" The man looked up at him slowly. His eyes were calm, but there was something strong behind them. Something Blake did not understand. And then, Blake's radio crackled loudly. A voice from the station said, "Attention units. Internal Affairs is on their way. Do not engage with the suspect." Blake froze. His face turned pale. "Internal Affairs," he whispered. He looked at the handcuffed man again, and for the first time, fear entered his eyes. Something was very, very wrong. The sound from the radio kept echoing in Officer Blake's head. "Internal Affairs is on their way." The words felt like a cold wave hitting his chest. He stared at the handcuffed man sitting calmly on the ground. The man did not speak. He did not complain. He only watched Blake with silent eyes, and that silence scared Blake more than anything. Backup was still a few minutes away. The wind blew softly across the empty road, making the moment feel even heavier. Blake kept pacing in small circles. His boots crushed small stones, and each sound felt louder and sharper. He kept glancing at the man, hoping he would say something, anything that made sense. But the man stayed silent, almost peaceful. Blake tried to shake off the fear building inside him. Internal affairs? Why would they come here? And why do not engage? None of it made sense. He swallowed hard and forced himself to breathe. But deep inside, Blake knew one truth. Internal affairs only came when something serious was happening. Something that involved him. His mind drifted back to memories he tried to forget. 2 years earlier, Blake had been called into the chief's office. The chief's voice was serious, almost disappointed. "Blake, we have received complaints. Too many. Your traffic stops, your tone, your behavior. You need to change." Blake had shrugged it off back then. He told himself the world was too soft, that he was just doing his job. But the complaints did not stop. More people came forward. Some officers even reported him for rude language and unnecessary force. Internal Affairs had investigated him once before, but the case faded due to lack of solid proof. Blake thought he was safe. He thought the world had forgotten. But now, as he stood on the empty highway with the wind brushing his uniform, he realized something terrifying. Maybe Internal Affairs never forgot. Maybe they were watching him all along. And maybe this man, this calm, quiet man, was the key. Blake felt sweat collecting on the back of his neck. He rubbed his face and tried to act normal. He walked toward the man again, trying to sound confident. "Who are you?" he asked sharply. The man looked up slowly. "I told you," he said in a soft voice, "you don't want to do this." His calm tone only made Blake more frustrated. "Stop talking in circles. Why is Internal Affairs coming here? What do they want with you?" The man did not answer. Instead, he looked at Blake with a kind of sadness, as if he already knew how this story would end. Suddenly, 2 patrol cars approached from a distance. Their lights flashed across the cracked highway. Backup had arrived. Blake felt a wave of relief. Maybe now things would make sense. 2 officers stepped out, Officer Grant and Officer Lopez. Both looked confused when they saw the handcuffed man on the ground. Their eyes moved between Blake and the man, trying to understand the situation. "What happened here?" Grant asked. Blake crossed his arms. Suspicious vehicle. Suspicious behavior. He refused to follow instructions. The man remained silent. Grant looked uneasy. "Did he resist?" "No," Blake replied quickly, "but he was acting strange." Lopez stepped forward. His eyes stayed on the man. Something about the man's calm posture made him nervous. He knelt down politely. "Sir, may I see your ID?" The man nodded. Lopez took out the ID from Blake's pocket, opened it, and froze. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Grant leaned in to look, and he too stepped back in shock. Blake felt his stomach drop. What is it?" Lopez swallowed hard. "Blake, do you know who this is?" Blake shook his head. Lopez turned the ID around slowly. The name read, Jonathan Miles, Division Head, Internal Affairs. Blake's face drained of color. His throat tightened. He felt the world tilt slightly. Lopez whispered, "You handcuffed the man who investigates officers like you." Jonathan finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Officer Blake, I was on my way to your station today, to talk about your case." Blake felt the ground disappear beneath him. This was the beginning of the end, and he knew it. Officer Blake felt his legs weaken as the truth hit him. The man sitting calmly on the ground was not just any driver. He was Jonathan Miles, the head of Internal Affairs, the same department that had warned Blake many times. Blake stepped back, feeling the world close in around him. Jonathan did not move. He sat straight, as if he had expected everything. The stop, the handcuffs, the backup, even Blake's fear. His silence was heavy, almost painful. Grant and Lopez looked at each other, unsure what to do. Lopez quickly removed the handcuffs with shaking hands. "Sir, I'm very sorry," he said quietly. Jonathan nodded politely but said nothing. He rubbed his wrists where the cuffs had left red marks. Grant looked angry, but not at Jonathan. He was angry at Blake. "What were you thinking?" he whispered to Blake. Blake tried to speak. His voice cracked. I didn't know. That's the point, Grant hissed. You didn't even check. You never check. Blake felt heat rising in his face. Shame, fear, confusion. It all mixed inside him. Jonathan finally stood up, slow and controlled. He brushed dust off his suit jacket and picked up his briefcase from the car. The way he moved was calm, almost graceful, like someone used to power but never needing to show it. He looked directly at Blake. His eyes were sharp yet kind, an unsettling combination. "Officer Blake," Jonathan said softly, "I asked you earlier for your badge number. That was your chance to follow the rules." Blake swallowed hard. I can explain." Jonathan raised a hand gently. "You don't need to explain. I saw everything." Grant and Lopez were silent. They knew this was bigger than any normal traffic stop. Jonathan stepped closer to Blake, but his voice remained calm, almost gentle. "Do you know how many complaints your department has received about you?" Blake looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Jonathan continued, 7 formal complaints, 15 informal reports, 3 warning letters, 1 investigation. Each number was a blow to Blake's pride. He knew the numbers, but hearing them in Jonathan's calm voice made them feel heavier. Jonathan opened his briefcase slowly. Blake watched with fear, wondering what evidence was inside. The case clicked open, revealing neatly arranged files. Jonathan pulled out one folder. On the cover, Blake saw his own name, big, bold letters. Blake felt his heart sink. He whispered, "You were coming because of me?" Jonathan nodded. "Yes. Today was the final review of your case. I was going to speak with you at the station." Blake stepped back, shaking his head. "This is a mistake. I'm being targeted. I was just doing my job." Jonathan tilted his head slightly. "Your job is to protect people, not judge them, not intimidate them, not assume guilt." Lopez cleared his throat quietly. "Sir, what happens now?" Jonathan looked at him. "Now, we follow procedure." He placed Blake's file back into the briefcase and closed it gently. His calmness was more frightening than anger would have been. Jonathan walked toward the police car, stopped, and turned back. "Officer Blake," he said, "you still don't understand why this is happening." Blake blinked. "Then tell me." Jonathan stepped closer. "It's not your mistakes that brought me here. Everyone makes mistakes. It's your attitude, the way you speak, the way you assume, the way you use your badge like a weapon." Blake felt the words strike deep. His hands trembled. Jonathan continued softly, "You stopped me today without reason. You handcuffed me without cause. You judged me before I even spoke. And that tells me everything I need to know." For a moment, no one spoke. The wind blew dust across the road. The distant sound of a bird echoed in the silence. Finally, Jonathan sighed gently. "I expected better from you." He walked toward his car and placed the briefcase inside. Blake's voice trembled. Are you going to end my career?" Jonathan looked at him one last time. "That depends," he said quietly, "on what you do next." He closed the car door, leaving Blake standing alone with fear spreading inside him like fire. The moment Jonathan's identity was revealed, the entire highway felt different. It was as if the ground beneath everyone's feet shifted quietly. Officer Blake stood stiff, his heartbeat loud in his ears. He wanted to speak, to explain, to defend himself, but his voice was stuck deep inside his throat. Jonathan didn't rush. He walked to the back of his car, opened the trunk, and pulled out a small black folder. Its edges were sharp and clean, showing how carefully he kept everything. Blake felt a cold shiver run through him. He had a strong feeling he knew what the folder contained, but he hoped he was wrong. Jonathan approached Blake slowly, stopping just close enough for the tension to tighten. "Officer Blake," he said gently, "I want to show you something." Blake swallowed hard. He nodded weakly. Jonathan opened the folder. Inside were colorful tabs and paper-clipped documents. The first page alone carried a heavy weight. It showed a printed list titled, "Complaints Filed Against Officer Blake." Grant leaned forward to read it. Lopez's eyes widened. Blake felt as if someone had punched the air out of his lungs. Jonathan turned to the next page. October last year, he said calmly. A man reported that you screamed at him for asking why he was stopped. Blake muttered, "He was rude first." Jonathan flipped to the next case. December. A young woman said you kept your hand on your gun even when she cried and said she was scared. Blake looked away. She acted strange. Jonathan lifted his eyebrows slightly. She acted scared. The words hit Blake softly but deeply. Jonathan continued, "Here, February. A father driving his kids to school. You accused him of lying, yet he never broke a rule." Blake took a step back. "People lie all the time." Jonathan's voice remained soft. "Not everyone. And even if they do, you don't get to punish them before knowing the truth." Blake felt cornered, not by force, but by facts, facts he could no longer deny. Grant spoke quietly. "Blake, this is serious." Lopez nodded. "These aren't small things. These are patterns." Blake stared at them, confused. "Patterns." Jonathan closed the folder and held it in one hand. "Patterns," he repeated. "Your behavior repeats. Your tone repeats. Your assumptions repeat. And today, you repeated everything again." Blake felt his chest tighten. He whispered, "I was just doing my job." Jonathan took a slow breath. "Doing your job means following the law. Not your anger. Not your fear. Not your judgment." Blake's eyes shifted away, unable to meet Jonathan's steady gaze. Jonathan stepped closer. "Think about today," he said. "I answered politely. I stayed calm. Yet you raised your voice. You searched for guilt that wasn't there. You tried to control instead of communicate." Grant added softly, "You didn't even check his ID before handcuffing him." Lopez sighed. "That alone is enough to lose your badge, Blake." Blake felt the words sink deep. He wanted to argue, but every memory from moments earlier only proved them right. Jonathan opened the folder again and pulled out one last paper, a printed report with an official seal. "This," he said, "is the final review of your internal examination. Today, I was supposed to give you this at the station." Blake stared at the paper, terrified. What does it say?" Jonathan met his eyes. "It says you needed one more evaluation to decide if you stay in the force or leave." Grant and Lopez froze. Blake felt his stomach twist painfully. "And now?" Jonathan closed the folder slowly. "Now, today's incident becomes part of that evaluation. And it is the strongest part." Blake's breath shook. "So this is the truth?" Jonathan nodded. "Yes. And truth can't be avoided anymore." The wind blew across the open road, carrying dust and silence between them. Blake stood there, crushed under the weight of reality he never expected to face. And the truth finally came out. Officer Blake stood frozen as Jonathan closed the door of his car. The soft click of the door sounded louder than thunder to him. Grant and Lopez stayed still, unsure whether to move or speak. The air felt heavy, as if everyone was waiting for something powerful to happen. Jonathan did not start the engine. Instead, he stepped out again, holding a small tablet in his hand. There was no anger on his face, only calm, controlled focus. That calmness made Blake even more nervous. "Officer Blake," Jonathan said softly, "come here." Blake hesitated but walked forward slowly. His hands were slightly shaking, though he tried to hide it. He noticed the screen of the tablet but couldn't see the details yet. Jonathan spoke clearly. "This tablet contains body camera footage. Not just from today, but from your past stops." Blake's heart dropped. "You collected footage?" Jonathan nodded. "Internal Affairs collects everything. We observe patterns. Yours were not good." Grant and Lopez exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard rumors but never knew how serious it was. Jonathan tapped a file. A video played silently. Blake recognized the moment, 3 months ago. He had stopped a young black teenager for walking suspiciously. The footage showed Blake shouting, stepping too close, using fear instead of communication. Blake looked away. "It wasn't like that," He looked dangerous. Jonathan paused the video. Was he armed? No. Did he threaten you? No. Jonathan's voice stayed gentle, but each question struck harder. Then why did you raise your voice? Why did you put your hand on your gun? Why did you refuse to let him explain? Blake had no answers. Jonathan switched to another video. This one from a traffic stop 6 months back. A mother with 2 kids in the back seat. Blake had spoken rudely, accusing her of lying about where she worked. Nothing illegal was found. The woman left in tears. Lopez sighed when he saw it. Blake, man. Blake felt his chest tighten. I was following procedure. Jonathan shook his head. No. You were following your prejudice. The words hit harder than any punch. Blake felt exposed, like someone had torn open every mistake he ever made. Jonathan continued, Today, I did not need proof. But you gave me proof anyway. I was sitting quietly, giving clear answers, showing no threat. Yet you treated me like a criminal. Blake clenched his jaw. You provoked me. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. How? Blake looked down. He knew the truth. There had been no provocation, only his own assumptions. Jonathan stepped closer, voice low but firm. This badge you wear, he pointed at Blake's chest, it's not a weapon. It is a promise. A promise to protect every person, no matter their color, class, or background. Blake swallowed hard. The badge suddenly felt heavy on his chest. Grant finally spoke, his voice calm but serious. Blake, you crossed lines. Many times. Lopez nodded. And today. You crossed the biggest one. Jonathan took a breath, then spoke the words Blake feared most. Officer Blake, you are removed from duty, effective immediately. Blake staggered. He felt as if the ground moved under him. Removed? No, please. I need this job. Jonathan's expression softened just slightly. Everyone needs a job. But not everyone misuses it. You had many chances. You ignored them all. Blake's eyes filled with frustration. You don't know what pressure I face. You don't know how hard this job is. Jonathan met his gaze. You are right. The job is hard. Every officer faces fear. But fear does not give permission to judge innocent people. He stepped back. And today, you judged me before I even said a word. Blake felt a deep burn inside his chest, anger mixed with humiliation. Jonathan continued, There will be a full hearing. You will present your side. But I will present mine too, with evidence. Grant and Lopez stood behind Jonathan now, silently supporting him. Blake looked at their faces. For the first time in years, he felt alone. Jonathan turned away, ready to leave, but paused. Blake, he said gently, you could have been a great officer. But greatness requires respect. And you forgot that. He walked back to his car. Blake watched helplessly as Jonathan prepared to drive away, taking with him the decision that would change Blake's life forever. Jonathan sat inside his car, but he did not start the engine yet. He watched Blake through the window, watching the fear, the confusion, and the sudden emptiness growing inside the officer. For a moment, Jonathan almost felt sad. Not because Blake was losing his badge, but because Blake never understood the real meaning of that badge. Grant and Lopez stepped back, giving Jonathan space. They stood quietly near their patrol car, watching the final moments unfold. Both officers knew this was the end of something big, something that had been building for years. Jonathan finally opened the door and stepped out one last time. His calm presence made the wind feel louder, sharper. Blake looked up at him, hope flickering weakly in his eyes. Is there any way to fix this? Blake asked, voice trembling. Jonathan walked closer until he was standing right in front of him. Fixing it, he said softly, starts with understanding it. Blake frowned. Understanding what? Jonathan looked directly into his eyes. The damage you caused. Not just today. Every day you used fear instead of respect. Every day you judged someone because of how they looked. Every day you forgot your own duty. Blake opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Jonathan continued, You think internal affairs ends careers. But we don't. We correct behavior. We protect the public. And sometimes, yes, we remove those who refuse to change. Blake stared at the road, his voice small. I didn't realize. Jonathan shook his head gently. That is the problem. You never tried to realize. For a moment, silence covered the highway. Only the soft rustle of dry leaves moved around their feet. Then Jonathan took a deep breath and stepped aside. I will submit my full report today. After that, the hearing board will decide your final fate. Blake looked up quickly. But you can change it, right? You're the head of the department. You can help me. Jonathan sighed. Help doesn't mean hiding the truth. Help means letting you face it. Blake felt a heavy ache in his chest. He wasn't used to losing. He wasn't used to being wrong. Today, both were happening at the same time. Grant approached slowly. Blake, he said quietly, maybe this is a chance to learn something. Blake gave a short laugh, but it was empty. Learn what? That my whole career is over. Lopez shook his head. No. Learn that the badge is not about power. It's about responsibility. Jonathan nodded. And respect.